The Daily Mail, a tabloid newspaper, told its 200 million readers that I had gonorrhea and exactly how I spread it. And as soon as I knew this story was going to be written, I knew the comment sections were going to be brutal, and they were. People called me stupid, ugly, gross, you name it. But the truth is, I told the Daily Mail to write that very article, and here's why. If politicians would just admit the very thing I'm about to admit, their life would be easier. I enjoy sex. And because of that, I had always gotten STI tested regularly. And back in 2021, I had just gotten an STI test result that said I was negative for all of the things it tested for, including specifically gonorrhea. And just a few days after that, I had a woman text me and tell me that I had given her gonorrhea, and I was shocked because, well, I had a negative test result. So I talked to her about it, and I showed her the test results, and she said, "Have you ever been throat swab tested?" And I thought, what the hell is that? I had never even heard of that before. But off to the doctor I go. To my surprise, the first doctor had never heard of it either. I go to the second doctor. He knew about it, ordered the test, but then the phlebotomist in the basement, who was not a young woman, did not know what it was and would not do a throat swab test because she didn't know how. The third doctor knew what it was, ordered the test, and sure enough, I had a completely asymptomatic case of oral gonorrhea. Well, that made me pretty mad because, well, I paid for an STI test, and like everyone else in the world, I got an STI test to find out if I had an STI. And my test was not only a waste of money and a waste of time, but it hurt someone else. And then I started doing some more reading, and I found out that oral gonorrhea is actually more common than genital. At every single study I can find where they look at people's genitals and their mouth, the mouth is more likely to be infected by about 2x on average. They're all different. And that's for gay men, heterosexual men, women, you name it, across the board. The positivity rates differ, but it's usually about 2x for the throat. And that really, really made me mad because we tell people to get tested, but if they're not getting tested in the places they're most likely to get infected, and then they spread that infection anyway, what's the point? But before I tell you more about the sex and exactly how this happened and how it spreads, I first have to tell you a little bit more about me so you understand the rest of this story. What I'm about to tell you is going to make some of you really uncomfortable and really mad, but I hope you understand that I didn't make the culture, I was raised in it. I was raised in a trailer house in a very rural part of the Midwest United States. And there were two things that you did not want to be known as, or you would be made fun of mercilessly. One of them was lazy, and the other one was a word that starts with the letter P, and I'll let you figure out what the rest of it is. What do I mean by lazy? Well, if you didn't have money for gas or to take a girl out on a date or that sort of thing, you didn't ask your parents for that. You worked for that. And if you weren't known as someone who worked, you couldn't associate with anybody, at least not holding your head up above ground level there. People just made fun of you to no end. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, when I was a senior in high school, I was 17 years old, and I cut this finger off while working on Super Bowl Sunday for a local farmer. Basically just a cash thing. There was no employment paperwork. I don't even think I was making minimum wage. And looking back now, I was definitely working on a piece of equipment that wasn't very safe, that I had no training on, and that someone who was a teenager would never use something like that today. But at the time, I was just happy to have some money, a few bucks to put into my pocket, even if that came, $4 or $5 an hour at a time. And as soon as the surgeon could make a stump out of my finger here and it stopped bleeding in a couple of weeks, I went right back to work for that same guy. It never occurred to me to sue that person. That's not what my parents told me to do. That's just not the culture that I was raised in. You worked and you worked. Going back to the P word, if something happened to you and you didn't take a stand, if you didn't do something about it, you might as well leave town. Or I didn't live in town. You might as well leave the area because you wouldn't be able to show your face ever again. So that's who I am at a core still today. So when this STD thing made me mad, and believe me, it did, I had to do something about it. So I sent a few emails for the testing company like, "Hey guys, you ever thought about offering throat swabs?" Like blah, blah, blah. Not really any sort of logical response that made me think they were going to change. And in fact, they still haven't. That didn't really work. And the next thing I could think to do was to contact a lab myself. And so I did that. And they said, "Well, if you're going to do STI testing in the United States, you need physicians." So then I found myself in a situation where I had to create an entire telehealth company. And I did, and that's called Shameless Care. But here's the thing about it. I have have no investors. I've not asked for any either. And I have put my entire life savings into it. And I do mean entire life savings. My chips are in. One thing that is different from us is there are very few companies that offer comprehensive testing for gonorrhea and chlamydia, but the ones who do still have, something for every price point. Like we're still going to sell a $69 test that's genital only and not really tell people that it's going to miss most cases of gonorrhea and chlamydia. I can't abide by that. It's an ethical issue with me, and that might sound funny. The guy earlier who said he likes sex and he gets STI. Look, everybody's ethics and morals are different. Mine are, sex is great. Tricking people is not. That's kind of where my moral stance is. Yours may vary. Hell, people made fun of me in the Daily Mail. You can make fun of me in the comment sections here if you want. But bottom line is, I have literally bet my entire future on this company because as I look around public health, nobody was talking about this. All of this money is spent on get tested, here's free testing, which is taxpayer funded. Like all of these resources, and nobody stopping to say, hey, gee, guys, most cases of gonorrhea are oral and we're not swabbing the throat. Like no one stopped to have that conversation, so I'm stopping to have it. So back to the Daily Mail. Why on earth would I write that story? Well, I don't want to. I don't want to be on YouTube. I don't want to be on Instagram. I don't want to be known as the guy who got gonorrhea and spread it. I do not want that. I do not want to be here in front of you right now. I certainly don't want to be made fun of on the Daily Mail. I don't want to be known the rest of my life as the guy who got gonorrhea. But here's the thing. There are very few problems in life that are solvable. Child hunger, poverty, bad schools. Those are very complicated subjects. The subject of, hey, if somebody is requesting STI testing, test them in the places they're most likely to have those STIs is so easy. It's right here. It's right here on our fingertips. We can do this. And so I wrote to the Daily Mail, talked to the science writer. I think he was a little skeptical at first, but I showed him the data and he thought, my God, this guy is right. And so, yes, there are people who read that story who are just going to make fun of me. And they've long since even forgot they read the story. But if even just one or two physicians read that story, then I consider that to be a job well done and a job worth doing. So that's my story. And ultimately, that's the story of Shameless Care, a company that I didn't want to run. Well, I certainly didn't want to start. Let's put it that way. But here we are because this is just too important to not do anything about it. I'm Robert from Shameless Care and we'll talk soon.